I realized I was wrong. At that moment, I smiled. And what happened was that was the same thing. I was dissipating that negative energy inside me in form of a
Huh.
smile. Right. And
Yeah.
we see that. You talk to people, and I realize when I coach people sometimes and I talk about emotional intelligence,
How our brain is wired and how we construct our reality, what we believe in every day, that works together. The belief systems we're in.
yeah.
So, it's an interception. So what are the ingredients that I consciously can put into my everyday life? What are the words, the feelings, as you said, the emotional intelligence? What can I put into that all creates something that, even if I'm flawed, if I'm biased, it creates at the end of my aim is to have positive energy. Reminded me of evolutionary psychology. So this book is basically in a total different language. It's nicely outlining where we're coming from, and that is excellent. So what I like, for example, what really resonated with me was this: we are animals, we have unconscious bias, I think in our awareness, we need to just realize that we are completely flawed. Our brains, they are designed to survive. So how do we survive? And that's the main, isn't it? It's the main theory of that book is we have that elephant in our own brain, and we deceive ourselves. We don't want to admit it to ourselves that we are flawed, that we have bias. Now, how it then explains everyday behavior. For example, this thing of conspicuous consumption. Do you remember that passage?
Yeah.
Conspicuous consumption. So we buy certain things just to prove something to our social environment.
Yes.
So we would buy I think the examples that were mentioned, luxury goods, we would tend to buy them not so much for what the object does, but more to show something, to demonstrate something.
Yeah.
Okay, now the theory that the book expands is different. But first of all, if you just take that, if we have awareness of how that works in our brain and why we're doing that, this book is really helpful because it reminds us how our brain is wired. So it's basically this survival thing. We want to survive in society. We want to advance. And therefore, we have these strategies to deceive ourselves. So that one I found really powerful. But before we go to the next stage, tell me what resonated most with you in that book.
The book, so awareness part, like you're saying, it made me a lot more aware. And what happened with that awareness is I have more compassion for myself now. Because I know that, hey, I'm wired this way. And for me to change that, I gotta first admit that. And I won't admit it if I am going to feel guilty about it. So, hey, this is who I am. Okay. And so once I did that, I told you the first time I heard this book, for first half an hour, I turned it off. I don't want to listen to this. Because the whole the whole talk about baboons and babblers was so right. I was like, no, that's like me. And I don't want to admit that. And then you look around people who are doing it, and there are people who we see, like I see, and I judge them. Look, they're not challenging their boss. They're trying to gel with what the boss is saying. I totally get that why they're doing it. I understand they should be doing something else, but even though you tell them this is wrong, they still continue doing that because it's a survival instinct that we have in
Survival
ourselves.
instinct, exactly.
Yeah? And saying that, I have a new definition for courage. And I think you have guessed it. It's basically challenging that this is how I do it, and this is what the society does. This is what everyone would do, but this is not the right thing to do. And I'm going to take a chance and do something else, which is the right thing to do. And even though I'm going to fail, I might get fired, I'm going to again do that in a different way so that I've learned from that. But I'm going to keep on learning how to do the right thing. I think that's a different definition of courage. I think it's not about fighting people. It's about first fighting yourself.
It's about yourself, yeah. You were just expanding on the self-awareness thing. It's what you get from the self-awareness, exactly.
Yeah. So I had the same questions on mind. What am I going to learn from that? And surprisingly, I was thinking a lot about how do I do marketing, my brand differently online, on LinkedIn. And then this whole chapter about marketing, like you talked about, we buy things because of that. And there's a thing he mentioned. Someone won a Nobel Prize in 1983. I forgot the name, and they talked about the third person's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they talk about, the reason we want to be significant is because it's a survival game, because it's all about the mating game. And so if we are more
Mm-hmm.
significant, then we'll be chosen for that. And that's a survival game. And we don't even know that. And nobody is doing it for like mating game, but behind the scenes, our brain is still doing those things.
The
And
brain
so
is doing it anyway. That's the deal of the book. It reminds us it's unconscious, it's doing it anyway. And that's so powerful, isn't it? We
it
need to
is,
be aware
right?
every day, and we're doing it in our channels, in our what we're doing in digital creation. I was realizing as well, I'm doing it every day. It's a survival game. Exactly. So my
So,
brain will now, in this new era of business, of digital, of online business, of entrepreneurship, my brain is wired to survive in that world. So what will I do? I will employ strategies anyway to show what I can do, but in such a way that it's, and now here comes in my criticism, right? The
yeah,
book says it's kind of, and I've even wrote that down. The book actually has a passage where it says it's ugly motives.
yeah.
So it has this negative note of that the elephant in the brain has this kind of, it's deceiving and it's unconscious and it's selfish, but it puts a flavor on it. It puts a negative flavor on it. So when I wrote to you, I would like to combine that with different perspective. What I mean by that is, my only criticism is, let's neutralize that. Let's not put a negative flavor, because I think the survival instinct is not negative. That's the only thing I would like to debate with the authors of that book, right? I would say
Nice.
it's something we need to be aware of. So this self-awareness, that's so strong from that book. But then let's normalize it. It's a normal thing that our brains are wired to be like that, and that we're flawed. Yeah. And that we can talk about it as well, like you and I do now. That is powerful. That is, what we're doing actually at the moment in talking about this book, we're normalizing talking about our own human flaws without it to be, it doesn't have to be negative. That's
really powerful, thinking about that what we put disgust towards things. Hey, this is a wrong action to do. That does not, because we are doing it because, first of all, we are wired this way. So let's not do that part. It's like saying, I don't like Superman, he flies. Well, that's Superman, he flies. A bird flies, right? It's just like that. It's an activity we do. We eat food, right?
Or the laughing example, if I may add there.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in, but did you hear that the passage of laughing, that really was a new thing to me. I never had reflections about why we laugh. That is something unconscious. So every culture, they're laughing. It doesn't matter which culture. That is universal and it's unconscious. So that is so powerful.
So what happened was, you're so right about it. I was writing I went back to one of my posts that I wrote recently, actually, before I got to the laughter part. And I had already posted that, but that's fine, because I post what I feel like. And so I wrote a story in which I had a discussion with my team members in a team, and where I was not listening to them. And then I realized that I wasn't listening to them. And so as I'm reflecting my thoughts, I wrote, hey, I realized I was wrong. At that moment, I smiled. And what happened was, that was the same thing. I was dissipating that negative energy inside me in form of a smile, right? And we see that. You talk to people, and I realize when I coach people sometimes, and I talk about emotional intelligence, and they don't want to believe in that, because a lot of people don't want to go towards emotions. They don't want to touch that. They're like me, like 10 years ago, like me. And what happens is that when they listen, then they don't want to do it, but they smile at the end. And that's also, I'm thinking, okay, is that dissipating like their negative thoughts about, I don't want to do this, but I still want to be like calm. So they're dissipating negative energy. And I realize I do it a lot too. I'm thinking somebody is doing something, I don't like that, and I end up smiling. Then I realize, So now when I'm smiling,
that's interesting. Exactly.
I'm thinking, okay, I'm catching myself a lot smiling every day, like without any jokes around me. I'm just
That's a very good sign, by the way. That's a very good sign. But it's, the self-awareness, that for me was also an enrichment by the book, is self-awareness. Okay, as you just described, for me it's in different situations, but why do I smile now? What is going on? What is the link now between my brain and my state of being? What is happening? I'm becoming more self-aware. So this is really what resonated with me. Now, my suggestion for this book would actually be to, we could actually try to invite even the authors, to combine that with a more, how can I say, neutral or positive flavor of having that evolutionary psychology, that awareness of where we're coming from and how our brains are wired, combining that with a more social view. Because what I also strongly believe in is this, the side of social psychology of us, which means we together as social beings, like you and I now, or in a group, in a community, we construct our realities by exchanging ideas. And that also rewires our brain. So there's another force. So one force is this inbuilt wiring. And then the second force, and the third and fourth, and there's many forces that creates our brain on a daily basis. Why do I do this? I don't know. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like it's creating new connections in the brain. And I have had this wonderful person. She's called Maria Luisa Engel. She was on the channel as well. She's a neurochange solutions consultant. And she was trained in this phenomenon that is called neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Which means, and you've probably read about it as well, which means what are the social influences that rewire our brain on a daily basis?
Interesting.
And that one I would like to combine with that fascinating book, because for me now, what it means, what I take away to put into action is, on my journey of life, I'm really watching myself. So what brings joy? What brings positive energy? So it is always a mix of how I'm wired, what am I, made of, physical being, presence, and then there's the social. And the social is the people I meet, the people I talk to, the natural environment, the artificial environment, maybe the technology, and that together creates something in my brain. So that is what I really, would love to explore more in terms of how that works all together, because I watch myself on a daily basis. What are those days where everything fits together well and I've learned and something changed? And what are those days where I feel something is going maybe in a direction that I don't want to feel that way, And that's what you were saying before was also, the thing about how our brain is wired and how we construct our reality, what we believe in every day, that works together, the belief systems we're in.
Yeah.
So, it's an interception. So what are the ingredients that I consciously can put into my everyday life? What are the words, the feelings, as you said, the emotional intelligence? What can I put into that all creates something that, even if I'm flawed, if I'm biased, it creates at the end of my aim is to have positive energy,
Yeah, that's right. So social. So when we are in the social environment, can you talk more about the social pieces? Because obviously, I didn't hear that part about the social impact of how it impacts the neuroplasticity. So when you think about the social environment, from this book, it talks about we use our social environment to raise our own standards. Meaning, we compare ourselves to other people to see, hey, where we are in the significance. Much like the great sequoias in California, where they keep on, climbing up so they can get more sunlight. And so we are wired for that. So when we are in social setting, I've seen, when people say, hey, this person is acting out of ego, you can see that they're trying to brag about themselves. And he talks about it in this one. We brag about it because that's where we create our brand, right? If you look at it, I'm bragging about myself on LinkedIn. Right. And so because that's where I'm going to get some business out of it. And so the same thing you talk about, that when people talk in a forum, we are used to this habit, we are bragging about ourselves, and that come across as ego. But the thing is that ego seems like it's part of our feeling significant, us appearing perfect.
I would agree with that. The ego is part of how we're wired, because otherwise we don't survive in this world. But ego is also negatively associated and represented in our society. In popular culture, ego is negatively represented.
Yes.
So what I'm suggesting is this intersection now is the interesting one. How can we use that fact? It's simply a fact that we want to talk about ourselves to survive in a positive way, because actually what we want to do, the end game for us, for you, for example, for me, is positive. So how can we use that? and say, okay, it's a fact that my brain is wired. I need to demonstrate myself, otherwise I won't survive. And how can I then interact with those people and belief systems that will reinforce that, but reinforce it for a positive end goal, because at the end of the day, you're working for a positive, end goal.
So there is this goal state which we want to be positive. We want to end up in a positive state. We don't want to be negative state. But ego is also part of life. So changing that in a way that it comes...
Normalizing it. No, for me, that would be now the next step of the book, to say, okay, I don't want to value, I don't want to judge ego or the fact that I'm biased. Maybe it's even good that I'm biased, and that I have these flaws as a human being. I want to overcome that by now connecting that flaw that I have with something positive, and that's the social. That's our world. I mean, look at the great, I had a fantastic interview with a guest on Power Minds about the great achievers of this world, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King. If you look at really the greats that were threatened by their life to achieve something better than themselves, they overcame that. And they used the fact that they knew, they possibly had this self, how would you call that? If you completely forget about even yourself, if you put yourself last, and you even risk your life, that's the extreme examples, but it shows that it's possible,
Yeah, no, you are right. It's possible. I have seen other examples, just like you're mentioning, where people are not caring about themselves, they care more about the world. Yeah. And I'll go back to the ego part. There is a chicken and egg problem. I've been trying to solve that in a different way. And that was a very good point you brought up. I was not going to brought that part up. So we have ego, but ego comes in a social setting. Without a social setting, there's no ego.
Yeah, and now, it's intertwined.
It's intertwined, right? Like they say, BMW advertised in a magazine where it's only a few people who would buy BMW, but it's also showing because people who cannot afford BMW are also looking at it, and the rich know that. That's why they buy it, because the poor appreciate the BMW as a luxury vehicle. That's what the significance part is, right? And that's again playing on ego. So if we accept, say there's a setting, in the setting there are 5 people sitting, and I go start bragging about my own stuff, like how great I am, what achieved and stuff like that. That's ego talking. Now what's going to happen is that ego, because I'm doing a survival instinct, is now going to trigger ego in other people. They're going to make it uncomfortable, because now they're going to feel, oh, we are lower in significance. Now I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah, this is where negative spiral sets in, what you're describing.
Negative spiral. Yeah, it's and so if we were to accept that, because they're also human acting that way, then now we can think, okay, it should be positive. I think there's a gap where we solve it in a way that we break this negative cycle.
Yeah, and I think we're able to. That's us as social beings, That's I think this book, The Elephant in Your Brain, that book describes us as the part of the animal world and where we're coming from. It describes us in our flawed animal sense. Now, what we are talking about now is us. We have also this, we are social beings as well, but social beings able to overcome that flaw. Not overcome. I strongly believe also we will never overcome. We will never be rational beings. That was part of my research when I did really organizational psychology. So I open a bracket now. That's a different topic. But, in the business world, since the early theories of economics, there's this assumption that humans can be rational. And I've done a lot of research on that, and actually it has been shown, it has been out in some studies in sociology, in psychology, it has been shown that humans are not rational. Similar argumentation like in that book, because we are simply biased unconsciously, and it has been even taken into the economics literature to prove we will never be rational, and that's why all the old economics theory will not hold, because our decisions will never be 100% rational. So if we take that into account as well, I think we can, we can use self-awareness as a trick to normalize it and to accept it and say, okay, we are irrational beings. So how can we use that to our advantage to help and to create better things, And that's what I believe in. That's where the social force comes in. We need to create belief systems where we say, okay, let's normalize our flaws, work with that, and create something better. And that is, it's only possible. That's why also on my channel, I talk always about the role model. If we have a positive role model so that the spiral goes upward again.
I like the part about how you're bringing social interaction into it and then mixing that with awareness, a social awareness of what's happening. So we are compassionate towards each other. And I do think when someone is acting in form of an ego and other people stop doing, like, I mean, they don't trigger and then they manage this person also stops emitting ego.
That's the social influence, exactly.
Social influence, right? A lot of times people would get triggered by looking at someone more successful, and it would make them feel insignificant, and that's when they start talking about the ego as well. But if the other person starts making them calm down, like, hey, I'm also flawed.
That's exactly the mechanism, to deal with those. I have actually just written about that. It's when people have they get triggered because they have these insecurities. Again, that comes from our animal being. Oh God, I need to be better. So they feel threatened by successful people. And that's exactly in the spirit of this book. What happens. That's why so many successful celebrities get death threats, because they are threats to others, because they feel, oh my God, I will never be like this. I'm so poor. How can they be so successful? It's so unjust. And that is where all the negative energy comes from in the social.
That's right.
Really
I've been thinking, so on the same pattern about how can we take something and, add a positive flair to it. I've been thinking about, in software development, product development, we have a principle that says that meet the customer where they are. So if you want to give a solution, we tend to give solution, but we don't meet the people where they are, what they're feeling, right? Resonate with them, what are they looking at? So I'm going to add a little bit on top of more of that. So look at our behavior, like this egoistic behavior because about survival. Then there's another behavior that we have. For example, we get jealous of people. Again, we put a negative connotation on that, jealous. But jealousy also is coming from these areas. But I look at these as different mechanisms to have the same. So survival is the main goal, but they're different mechanisms. Jealousy is one, ego is one, right? And they may have the same
mechanisms,
are different ones, right? And so what I've been thinking about, hey, how can I use this muscle of jealousy? Because it's a thinking pattern. Jim Quick talks about the brain is a muscle because it works like a muscle. It may not look like a muscle, it works like a muscle. You don't have limited storage. If you keep on thinking, storing more information, using it, your brain's capacity increases in terms of storing information. And so if we use this muscle of jealousy, but in a different way. And so what I did last time, in this book, he talks about, this is quote by J.P. Morgan, and the quote says, man has two reasons for doing anything, a good reason and a real reason.
Yes. I read that one,
Yeah, so it's the same thing. Hey, I'm doing something, but so for example, if I go on LinkedIn, like recently I posted something on LinkedIn where I talked about, and my good reason was I was giving people tips on how to do interviews better. And at the end, my CTA said, hey, if you want, there's a class I'm doing, sign up right now. Now, within that as well, so that was one. The real reason was I was taking them towards my CTA to buy something, right? And I had justification why I need it. Obviously, survival as well, because I want to make money off that. Then within that CTA, I talked about if you pre-register today, because there's no price, I'll give you a discount. So there's again a real reason and there's a good reason, because I'm going to give you a discount, but the real reason is I actually want you to sign up. So now these things are going in play. Now, before this, the other part I did was, one of my challenges was, how do I use the same thing in a good way? Now, I wasn't aware about this good reason, the real reason. But what I wanted to do was, so accidentally did something which acted like that. I want people to change their behavior. I want me to change my behavior. I want to upgrade my own behavior. So I thought, okay, how can I do that? And then I said, okay, people are interviewing for behavioral interviews. what I can do is that I can teach them how to do a good behavior interview. But in
Yeah.
that behavior interview, my real reason was basically I wanted to give them a chance to look at their interviews as another opportunity to fix their past behavior. So if they had a conflict with their boss or somebody else and they thought they were wrong, now they're about to go into the interview, you have a moment to do a self-reflection now when you're not triggered, to again go
Mhm.
back and think, maybe was I wrong? So I gave them a two-piece framework. Now, good
Ah,
reason
yes,
was,
yeah.
how do you ace your behavior interview? But my real reason was, I wanted you to think about how can you change your behavior. So what I realized was I can use the same muscle which we use, but I can use that very tactically, very easily, because I have that built in too. I want to have a good reason, real reason. So I can create content with that intent.
Exactly. And you
My
use it for
content can serve that.
positive cause. And
Yes.
also what you're doing is you're destigmatizing sales at the same time, because sales is stigmatized as negative. I don't know why our generation X, right? We are Generation X. We were raised to believe, it's a belief system, that's a social creation, that sales is negative and should not be done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you and I come from the same world. I also started out, my first job was in software engineering and big software projects. And oh my God, don't sell anything to the client. Be authentic. That was the value. Don't sell. So my first 10 years in business were not selling. Don't sell. I don't know where that comes from. It's a different thing now. If you look at Generation Z, they don't perceive doing a selfie video of themselves and saying that they're great or showing the best side of their face. They don't perceive that as selling themselves. They find that as a way of communicating. So it's a complete different social belief. Do you see that? And for me, it's a mystery why our generation still believes that sales should be negative. It's part of our, as you just described, it's a mechanism that helps you, that enables you to do good. And it's also part of your survivor system, because you want to do good also to survive. It's an individual cause and it's a social cause, because you want to help others and you get reward from it, a reward in terms of your emotions. You feel good, and so I always think it's this interaction. But first of all is always the first step, and I think we worked that out very nicely, is the self-awareness and the normalizing in terms of not judging it negatively. It's part of that whole, you've probably read that people are talking a lot about why do we have negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is this negative judgments of things like jealousy. Why does it have to be negative? Maybe I'm jealous because I want to get somewhere in life. I can use it positively, as you just said. You can flex that muscle in a positive way. So I think we need to teach our kids these branded feelings as negative. They can be, first of all, neutral. And then it's up to us what we make out of them.
You're right. So you're saying for us to use it in a positive way, first we have to neutralize it.
Yeah.
We have to put that disgust towards that.
As creating future memories in your brain. Future memories. That is so powerful. In terms of, our brain cannot distinguish between past and future. And now, Taha, if you think of the weekend ahead, if you want to have a positive weekend, she says, you can first of all spend maybe an hour in meditation to program your mind on your future memory of how you want to feel and what you want to experience on that weekend. And watch yourself, maybe you will have exactly that feeling, because you programmed yourself. And that is so powerful. And actually my answer to her was, okay, tell me, what is the trick? What do I need to do? She said, go to a quiet space, go to a relaxing space and just imagine. It's the vision, just imagine and connect feelings to it, connect positive feelings to it. I mean, she said I was like, okay, but but it's the same like if I remember a really lovely, whatever event I had in my life that I had positive feelings with, now I do the same for the future. I tried it actually with my last Power Minds guest. I did that before. I was like, okay, I don't know this lady, but let's imagine this will be a really good interview and I will laugh so much. Guess what happened? I laughed so much.
Oh, wow.
Nice. I was having so much fun with this lady. And afterwards, I was like, no, this can't be just coming from me. She was a lovely lady, But nice. You know what I mean? I'm thinking a lot about that. how we program our mind, this is exactly what you're saying, right? It's this technique. And I think it comes from our imagination, what we imagine things to feel like. And she told me, start with your feeling, not with your vision. First the feeling, imagine something feels really good, and then you put the vision to it.
I see. You have a feeling first, and then you put, you know what? Okay, that makes sense. Because now you're feeling that moment in the future. An emotional mind doesn't understand past and future. But what happens that when the rational mind intentionally plays a vision with a feeling, the emotional mind can tap into it and feels like that's the present.
Exactly.
And in that present, it starts feeling
and then see what happens. I'm doing that self-experiment with myself at the moment, because I'm like, can I really change everything? Because then there's other people coming, right? And these other people might be grumpy, bad moods. So what do I do? I cannot, And so what happens? That's a social interaction. Do I take on that negative energy, or can I block it? What do I do? So I watch myself a lot at the moment.
I've been trying it, but not with the feeling. It's hard to feel like if I imagine like some meal that I love, let's say ice cream or some chocolate, I can feel my taste bud thinking. So that's a feeling I can get. So one of the things I've been trying to think about is I start thinking about, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can start thinking about ice cream that I like. And my favorite ice cream is from Salt and Straw. So I'm going to think about that ice cream. And I'm going to think about I'm having that ice cream. And then I'm going to think about a future in which, like 5 years from now, and maybe how I want to picture myself, with success, people around me, me behaving in a different way, happy and all. And while I'm having ice cream, the same ice cream. So what's happening is that I felt that in this moment, the feeling of having that ice cream and nothing else. Then I took myself like a movie and zoom, boom, I'm in having the same ice cream, same street, but in a different scenario 5 years from now. So I basically teleported myself into future. I don't know. I'm going to try that and see how that works.
And you connect a feeling to a future memory. And since I know that concept, I'm so much like when the planning thing about our business, when we plan as well, I try to do that now. If I plan an action in 2 weeks' time, for example, now, if we agree to read another book, I will first of all connect a feeling to that now. I will emotionally plan. Because if I really want to enjoy the process, I want to have joy with it, because I decided purposefully and now I'm starting a business, this will be a joyful experience. So I need to connect memories.
You have when you're talking about this, I can recall a few more instances where I've seen or heard that. I talked last time about Arnold, and there's a movie coming out on Arnold this end of this month on Netflix. And so what Arnold talks about is he used to have these posters of all these other bodybuilders in his everywhere in his room, and he would look at them all the time. And then what he would do is that when he would go to the gym, he would look at the weights, and before picking them up, he would imagine his ideal self where he wants to be. And so he would lift up those weights with so much pleasure, because he's getting closer to that identity, where others would be like, oh, it's going to hurt so much.
Yeah, so there's a feeling he's projecting to the future. Yeah. So his brain is actually connecting with a positive feeling. Yeah.
Positive feeling, right? So very good, right? I think this is going to really help a lot of people who hear this thought about. I think you should do a lot more YouTube videos on this topic specifically.
We will do a lot of more YouTube videos. Everyone talking. It was really a pleasure.
Same here, as always. Thank you so much.